Welcome to the Indie Women Podcast, where we introduce you to the fearless women taking their filmmaking careers into their own hands, showing you how indie films get made. And here's your host, Heather Turman.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Indie Women Podcast, a show dedicated to the women in the indie film world who have found success bringing their projects to life on their own terms. I'm your host, Heather Turman. And this week I got to sit down with someone that, I found because I genuinely was intrigued by their work. The guest is Sara Robin. She's a German director, writer, DP, and producer based in Boston and Los Angeles. And she came into my sphere because a film of hers was screening at a Friends festival. And that film was called Cranberry Nights. And I was just in awe of the artistry of this film. It's everything that a short film should be. It's meaningful, it's impactful, it's well acted, it's well constructed. Her directing is flawless. And it left me wanting more, which, I mean, that's what a short film should do, right? Make the feature. So, that short film, Cranberry Nights, it screened in over a dozen festivals, including Holly Shorts and SCAD Savannah, and received awards for Best Directing and Best Film. And Sara's coming-of-age feature script, Here to Stay, written together with Shirley Miller, is currently placed at the top 5% of the Blacklist, and top 1% of Coverfly, which writer listeners know that is like an impossible feat. So you guys really are in for a treat. Sara knows her stuff, and I think it's very clear that her future is bright in the film industry. We talked about how she was drawn to film, how she got her start, and what she's working on now. And I am sure it is going to leave you guys inspired. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sara Robin. Hello, Sara. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you, Heather?
I'm well as well. This is Sara Robin. I'm so happy to have you as a guest on Indie Women. You are an amazing writer and director. And I'm so jazzed that you are on the show. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's dive right in. Can you tell us how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, it was at a time where I was rather lost. I'd come out of college where I studied philosophy and politics and decided didn't want to continue that and wasn't quite sure where to go. And then film, I more or less fell into it by meeting people who were working in it, and just had that sense that it kind of presented that perfect combination of all the things I liked. I was always enjoying technical things. I did a lot of creative work, a lot of music, quite a lot of writing growing up, a lot of reading. Always loved storytelling. And then it also had that organizational kind of aspect to it that I feel like oftentimes the creative folks tend to struggle with a little bit. But for me, that was always pretty innate skills. I thought, you know what, this is kind of the perfect intersection of all the different things I like to do, and it won't get boring. And I was quite right. It still hasn't gotten boring, which is nice. And, growing up, the one thing I always knew when people asked me what I wanted to be, I never knew what I wanted to be necessarily. I had all sorts of ideas, but the one thing I always said was I don't want to work in an office. And I'm quite happy that I've managed to avoid that. So long story short, I was in Australia at the time for college. I went back to Germany, got lucky, met some people in Frankfurt, my hometown, who were working in film, got on set, had a great time, and kind of went into it because I like being on set. I wouldn't call myself a big movie buff. I'm still not. I'm still pretty picky, like what I like, and I don't spend that much time watching films, honestly. But I love being on set, and that's what drew me in. And then I went to study in Boston and loved it, and well, the rest is history.
Beautiful. So you just said so much that I have questions about. Where are you now? Are you back in Germany? Are you in Boston?
No, I'm in Boston actually. So I did a stint in LA for 4 years, and COVID struck. I went back to Boston because I had some family here, and ended up staying because some opportunities opened up in Boston. And well, COVID is still around too.
Totally.
I thought it was going to be a brief visit, and here I am.
I mean, I feel like COVID, if anything, has made the already, like, I feel like film in other cities has been, on the incline over the last few years. And I feel like COVID sort of really pushed it even more so in that direction because, they're like,
it's just so hard in a large city of 10 million people to keep everybody safe. But in smaller towns, it's almost like it's easier, it's cheaper, it's all sorts of wonderful things. Or I guess there's pluses to that.
Definitely. And one thing I learned is being in a city full of filmmakers is not necessarily the place where it's easy to make independent films.
100%, yes.
Yeah.
Because there's so much pressure, and so much, there's this innate energy of constantly comparing yourself to others rather than trying to collaborate, trying to learn from, trying to just appreciate one another's, skills. So.
Yep, you said it very well.
And so you are born in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you, or is that? Okay.
That was me. I'm sorry. I told them I am off limits, but that was ignored. I'm closing my message trap.
We live in, the society that's common nowadays. If a cell phone doesn't go off, it's strange. But you're from Germany, so Germany born. You went to school initially in Australia, you said.
For college, yeah. I was in Germany all through high school, then went to Australia. This was very unplanned. I went traveling there after high school to find myself. And well, I guess I found myself enough to realize that I wanted to stay in Australia for a bit. So that's what I did. Got lucky, got a scholarship, was able to go there. And yeah, then I went back to Germany to test out if I actually liked film, loved film, and then got a spot at Boston University and came to Boston in 2013.
Amazing. That's super amazing. So I had the luxury of getting to, actually, that just makes me want to ask. So you went to Boston University. Did you get a master's in film? Okay, cool.
I did, yeah. Beautiful.
So I had the luxury, I came across you because a friend of mine runs New Filmmakers LA, Larry LeBeau. And you had a short film that was in there, and I had only seen the trailer at first, but it really intrigued me and it looked beautiful. And I was like, I always scour to see how many female filmmakers are, showcased, and I'm always looking at festivals. And I now getting to ask you to be on the show, I had the luxury of getting to see the short film in all its glory, and I absolutely loved it. It's called Cranberry Nights, and without giving it away too much, it's a short film essentially about an illegal immigrant. And do you feel, was the inspiration drawn from your own life in terms of being an immigrant and navigating that world, or?
Yeah, my experience is almost in a way diametrically opposed at times, because the protagonist Juana is Mexican American, so you have the whole kind of racism layer in her experience that I never experienced. I have the opposite problem. People think I'm American and they forget that I'm not. And they're like, what do you mean you're on a visa that expires? And I'm like, yeah, my life is kind of, on edge a lot. People completely forget. Or they throw these references at me, right? Like childhood stuff that they saw on TV. And they're like, what do you mean you have never seen it? I'm like, I was in a different part of the world. So it has sensitized me to how much people just assume you are the same if you kind of, look a certain way, if you don't have a strong accent, and how much people assume you're other just based on your looks as well. And I think with Cranberry Nights, I wanted to play with that, and I purposefully picked somebody who did not have an accent, right? And who seemed to fit in fairly well. And we just think she's so shy, like we don't really get the idea that this could be about something else. And we don't question that. I bet if she had an accent, we would, get there way faster. And so the film was very much playing with that idea, like, why are you surprised at the end? Like, what are your assumptions that, you maybe start realizing when you question, like, why is there a surprise? Why did we not catch on to this sooner? So that was kind of the purpose with the piece.
Yeah. And I feel like it was really excellent. And because like you said, you don't really know, you say she's shy. Yeah, she's shy, she's timid. She's very responsible. It's very clear that she's, responsible and this amazing, when you recognize that she's an illegal immigrant, there's immediately this thing of, oh man, it just like that experience and how you always have to be so aware, you know, and so you like can't make yourself, you can't, you know, get to party like those other kids were partying and get to make those mistakes, because the smallest, you know, little slip and then you could ruin everything your mom tried to build for you, you know, your entire future. And you'd have to say goodbye to a life, you know, that you had been living, you know, forever. So it was so excellent in that way, and showcasing how someone you know, is not allowed to step out of bounds, basically, to draw attention to themselves.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm really glad, because that was also one of the things I really wanted to get across. I think oftentimes when we see undocumented people on screen, if we ever do, you know, they're depicted as victims, they're quite passive, and it's usually construed around that moment of deportation, or maybe it's an ICE raid, like it's usually that. But there is an everyday life that led up to that point, that is full of challenges and full of, you know, just amazing achievements, making it work under these circumstances. And even though I didn't have the time in the short to show the amazing achievements, maybe as much, apart from the fact that she was able to blend in and like she, you know, made it work and like try to negotiate, taking risks, and I mean, all of that, you can really tell like there's so much more story there. I really wanted to focus on that versus the very often, like, you know, kind of exploited moment of deportation that we get to see.
Absolutely. I love that, because it's that thing of there is such a stigma, like you said, with undocumented individuals, that they are not contributing members of society, and that's just not even true in the slightest. You know, living in Los Angeles, I probably come across a slew of undocumented people. I've probably worked with them for years, and it doesn't change how hard they work or how, you know, how much they contribute. And so I also, like you said, there's definitely more story there. But even just in her responsibility, like the air that she gave your protagonist, she carried herself with such an air of responsibility, and was so mature compared to her classmates and her peers, you know, that you get to see that, like, just because she's undocumented, like, she has her shit together way more than all these, you know, American kids who are just,
and quite often because she is undocumented, actually.
Exactly.
And that is something that we don't often see, we don't often know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I loved it. I loved your short. And so you said it is currently, and you are currently in the process of developing it for a feature.
Yeah. So we have a script under the name Here to Stay. It used to be Cranberry Nights, but then kind of we wrote the cranberry moments out of it, and we're like, well, I guess now. So it's called Here to Stay. It's been a lot of fun. I'm writing it together with another writer. His name is Shirley Miller. And we found each other also somewhat randomly. I was on the search for a co-writer, and he sent me some stuff. I liked his writing. We're very, very different. And at first I thought, oh, he's great, but not for this project. He did win me over, though. We did a little writing test, and we actually complement each other very well. He's great with humor. He's very fast. I tend to think about things deeply and sometimes too long, and I'm definitely more on the serious side. So it balances itself out in a really nice way that works for a coming of age story. And he has formerly undocumented family members, so there was a direct connection there, which was also awesome. So yeah, we worked on it. It did really well over the past, I want to say, like 6 months or so. I'm losing track of time, but it placed in a number of contests. We just became a second rounder for Austin, which is really exciting.
Very exciting. Congratulations.
We got into the Stowe Story Labs, which was a really awesome experience there, close to here, actually, in Vermont. Unfortunately, all remote this year, but that was really an awesome writing community to become part of and work with. And yeah, a whole bunch of others. I think Launchpad, we just got quarterfinalists. We'll see how far we go. So
cool. That's so
it's been good. It's been well received. And you know, I've been having a lot of those hard conversations of, if someone looking like me walks in a room with this pitch, like how far can I actually get? Because I know I can do it. I know I'll do my research. I will surround myself with people who understand the story and the culture on a deeper level than I do, and I'll make it work. But is this actually possible? So I'm still wondering, and I'm starting to work on other features to like, have several irons in the fire, because I know this one is a hard sell. I guess I could talk a bit more about my connection to it. It's very multifaceted. I don't want to get lost in it, but my mom was a refugee from Poland in the 80s, so she went through a phase where she didn't really have a proper place to be. She was in Germany, but she was not allowed to work legally. She was not allowed to study. So it kind of pushed her to do just work under the table, and it derailed her career she never got that back, right?
Oh.
So there was that experience, and then as a result, we oftentimes had Polish nannies and whatnot, like just hang out at our place. And they were all working under the table, and it was just that kind of normalized thing. You would help each other out, and so I grew up around that, and I always wanted to make something about it, but I thought it'd be more impactful to bring it up to present day and tell it in a context that is currently in the focus. So that's partially also where the inspiration ultimately came from. And then the political landscape was just asking for it.
Exactly.
I thought I want to contribute to this conversation and just remind us that we're talking about human beings, because it's so easy to forget somehow.
Yeah, it really, I mean, for a particular brand of American human in particular, it's they've got such blinders on. Of course, the racial aspects exacerbate the whole issue because there's such prevalent racism in this country. But
and immigration isn't easy. I mean, I'm not going coming from Europe, like, it is not easy, and it's only going to get harder, and those are hard questions we have to ask ourselves. And it's I'm not sitting here saying open all the borders, let anyone in. Like, it is difficult. It is definitely difficult, but I think we only as humanity have a chance to really deal with it in the best way possible if we approach each other as human beings in the process. If we forget that, then things happen that just happened on the border. And I think that's, as a filmmaker, that's the part where I think I can contribute, and that's what ultimately led to that film and then the feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Exactly. It's a sensitive issue, but humanity must always be protected. And honestly, like, I feel like the purpose of all storytelling is really to expose the humanity in all different walks of life, but it sounds to me like I personally, if I heard your background, that you do have a direct connection. Yes, you are not of, Mexican descent or, a teenager today, but dealing with those issues in America today, but you clearly, were raised by a woman who sacrificed, like you said, her whole career path and everything she'd set up for herself in order to flee. And so, that to me sounds like you absolutely qualify as being someone able to tell this, what's the word? You're qualified to tell this story. I believe that for sure. But it is like you say, I understand your trepidation or your hesitance rather, and saying like, oh, I want to work on other stuff to make sure, just in case, because this is a hard sell for me. But I actually don't, I think that, you are not born in America. You currently are probably working through the system in terms of, like you said, visas, and they will expire and all this different stuff. So
yeah, I can tell you, whenever I get a government letter in the mail, my heart sinks. It's not even rational. It's that irrational immigrant fear. I remember reading about it somewhere, and I thought, oh my God, that's so true. I have that too. And I never talk about it. And that's the weird thing. Like, there's certain experiences where you just go and deal with it. And that's definitely one of those. But like, every time police pulls me over, I'm like, oh God, what have I done wrong? What are the ramifications of this? And like, are they going to kick me out? Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what Cranberry Nights is about. That's why I'm like, this is totally, I mean, you just, you recast it in, a young teenage girl who immigrated from Mexico, but it's still a totally relatable, piece of because that's what the character is doing the whole time is. And I loved the tension. It's just so, like you said, we see that she's timid. We see all this stuff. We see that everything she's doing, she's approaching it with, there's a fear behind her eyes, like an uncertainty. And when she, like at first we're like, oh, is her mom just conservative and she's not allowed to dress, provocatively, and
I purposefully led you astray.
and in a beautiful way.
Very much
great job. Such a great job. And the cranberry stuff, I thought was so great because we think that something else is going to happen, that it's about something else, that she's, going to be in harm's way. She's not wanting to participate in drinking alcohol while everybody else is. And it's like, why is this girl so straight edge on the straight and narrow? And it's absolutely because she has an incessant, constant, lingering fear of, is this the day? If I step out of bounds, will we be deported, and will my mom just be so heartbroken? I really hope this feature, this needs to reach the masses. The story, it needs to reach the masses. So I really hope.
Thank you. It will, one way or another. Maybe
Maybe
not on the timeline that I, am dreaming up, but
totally.
I'll keep at it for sure.
Totally. And so what are you, have you, obviously getting your master's in film, did you do a feature as your thesis? Or
I wish I'd let you do that. Actually, actively discouraged us from it for all sorts of reasons. But in retrospect, I was always drawn to longer form things. I like subtlety, so it's hard in short films to do that and to tell a compelling story. It's kind of like you don't get to spend enough time on either. And I've been itching to do long form. I think the pragmatic side of me has continued to make shorts for the time being. But I'm finally at the point where I'm like writing a really low budget feature just to be able to make it, even if I don't get the support, just to get it done. But no, I did a thesis film, a short film, as a sci-fi actually. So I did manage to be ambitious.
Sci-fi.
And I liked it a lot. Sci-fi is my first love story-wise, and something that actually drew me into fiction filmmaking, because I started off thinking I was going to do documentary, and I shoot docs, and I love the process. But sci-fi was actually, and fantasy was what convinced me to give the fiction side a try, because I love making things up. So I love building worlds, and having that freedom feels so good. So it was nice to be able to actually pull off a sci-fi on a shoestring.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. So sci-fi is your first love. I have such an appreciation for individuals who can write and create sci-fi. I tend to be so, my wife is a huge sci-fi fan, but I'm like, and I love it too. I just like, my brain sometimes I feel I'm missing a lot of the metaphor and allegory because I'm so focused on trying to figure out how does this work in this world? I'm like, but it's such a feat, and it's such a creative, I have such respect and, admiration for people who successfully pull off sci-fi, for sure.
It's a lot of fun.
Love it. And so is your first love directing or writing? Where does your heart?
That's very easy to answer. Directing. Okay. I used to hate writing. I hated it all throughout school. The first short I ever did, which was before I went to BU, I actually wrote that in a heartbeat, and it was very easy. And then I went to school, got into my head about screenwriting, and it just became a chore. And thinking about, it's strange. I'm quite a structured human being, I'd say, but as soon as I approach a story thinking about structure, nothing works for me. I'm much better off, and it took a long time for me to just trust that I know what makes a good story and not think about structure until I'm in the polishing phase and like way into the polishing phase. Because if I approach it from a structure standpoint, I get way too bogged down and I lose what's exciting about it, and then I don't want to write it at all. And it's only recently that I realized, no, I've seen enough stories, I've read enough stories that a lot of it is habitual and you kind of make the right choices just because
Yeah.
you're so used to how it goes, and you don't have to like, it doesn't have to be forefront of your mind. But you know, it just gets you when you're in like writers groups. You get feedback and people give you feedback on the structure using those structural terms, and all of a sudden my brain is in structure and it's like I
Totally.
can't quite go there yet.
I identify with that completely.
Yeah.
I find when I've got a friend who really like is such a fast writer. She's so fast. And for her, she's like, oh, it depends on like what I'm always reading a different screenwriting book, and I'll, just to keep it exciting, like be trying their, different techniques, and I'll go back to others. But when I'm reading a screenwriting book, because I mean, I've done story analyst work and script work for years. I can tell everybody how to fix their script, like how to fix that story, like what's missing from that. And generally the truth is it's always emotion. It's always emotional connection. It's always, almost always, that's usually it. But when it comes to my own work, I absolutely get bogged down, overwhelmed by the concept of structure, overwhelmed by emotional beats, overwhelmed by, did this scene turn? Was there, you know what I mean? Like it's a lot. So I hear that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think part of starting to love writing was also just dealing with my own impatience a little bit and beginning to appreciate the rewrite process. Because the advantage of the rewrite process is that there's not a blank page staring you in the face. Like you have something to work with, and that makes it so much more enjoyable. Because then you can be in that position where you go through and you become your own editor. You see your own mistakes when you first write things down, or you see gaps. You see things that are really working, things that aren't, things that are paying off, things that aren't. When you first write it down, you're just like, at least I am, like just in the middle of it, and I don't know where the hell I am half of the time, and I just write things down, and it seemed great. And then the actual work begins.
It's true, yeah, because it is exciting, and I'm trying to befriend the rewriting process myself, in terms of trying to think about it like, okay, I now know, I feel like I know these characters so much more deeply because I finished a draft. So now I get to go back and say like, it might be fun to try this situation with these characters. It might be fun to see how these two play. You know what I mean? It's a little more, try to get yourself psyched up that way, because it can be overwhelming. But yeah, the rewriting process is where the magic happens. Just like fucking push it down, get the first draft down, and then look at it and be like, okay, I made a huge mistake. This is why this doesn't work. Yeah.
It also really helps having other people invested in the story, because it was the best for me to have a co-writer on that first feature, because whenever I got disgruntled with it or just wanted to give up on something, like he got excited again when he hit a wall, I got excited again. Like it was a very good balance. And sometimes just even having someone, like for the feature I'm writing by myself right now, I'm in touch with another she's also a multi-hyphenate director, writer, who's writing her own, and we just keep bouncing ideas back and forth between each other. We're not like actively writing the other person's script at all, but just having that space and that support is pretty huge, because it just helps try things out, get out of your head, stop being precious with things. Like it's really invaluable.
I agree.
So those things have made me also really love writing, that now I think I'm at a place where I still like directing a little better, but it's almost equal.
Good.
Yeah, but didn't start out that way for sure.
Sure. Yeah. I was a writer first. And my first three feature scripts were written with a partner, and because I couldn't finish any on my own, and like you said, like being able to bounce ideas off, or when you get stuck, the other person, has that solution. They've got an idea that you had, like, you're just a one-track mind, so you don't see it. So it's really magic. I always encourage other writers, like, try writing with a partner, or like what you've got going on, it sounds like is pretty great. because if you just have somebody who's at least aware of your story enough and aware of what the goal with the story is and what you're trying to do, that you can approach them and say, I'm stuck here, or I was thinking of trying this, and they might say, well, that would work, but I also feel like, and then you're
Exactly.
like, yeah,
Exactly.
so it's so helpful.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And what do you, aside from the scripts, do you have any other, shorts that you're going to be bringing to life soon, or like what's on your plate?
That is a very good question. Well, currently 2 new feature scripts are on my plate that I'm starting to get off the ground. One of them is again with Shirley, and this one, he pitched the story idea to me, and it is extremely autobiographical for both of us. So this one will be one where we can walk in the room and, kill the pitch. And also it's a story I'm very excited about. It's a bit too early to talk about it, but that one is starting up. Then my own feature script, which is a sci-fi. I'm really psyched for that.
Cool.
So really, I need to hole up and just write, which I'm very glad. I'm in Boston, and there's going to be the winter, and hopefully that'll be prime writing time. That is the plan. So my day job is in commercials.
Cool.
Which I'm slowly but surely trying to get away from. But it's mostly producing currently, and I'm working my way towards directing. So I have a couple of fun directing things coming up on that front, which is great. And short film is interesting. There's a short concept. It's one of the first ideas I've ever had. I feel like I almost may have had it before I went into filmmaking. It's a long time ago. It's all in my head. I've written it down at some point, can't find it. So whatever is left of it is in my head. And I was just walking around Boston and just seeing the scenery and thinking, oh, this would really fit here, actually. So I might try to do that.
Yeah.
Also, once it gets colder and people aren't as busy over here, and it's a bit easier to just pull favors.
Totally. And if it's been lingering in your mind, I feel like that's one of those things, like sometimes the first idea you have that you sit on, it's really just developing over time. And now you're back in Boston and you're seeing the scenery. Wait a second, so yeah, maybe inspiration will strike and that will come to life.
Yeah, I would like it to. And it could almost be a bit of a test for the sci-fi feature too, because there are some elements in terms of special effects that are similar. So that's the other thing. It does have some special effects, so I need to save up a little. But totally. Yeah, that one I hope I'll get to do. And I'm always coming up with documentary concepts too on the side, and just see what flies.
Totally. I mean, it sounds like, being a fan of documentaries, at first that you thought that was the direction you wanted to go. That you have a commitment to the truth, or at least are really passionate about the truth in a way, or compelling human stories. Do you feel like that's sort of true?
It's the truth. I wish I could say it's human stories. It's just the freaking truth, which is part of the reason I stopped studying philosophy, because I was like, well, I'm not getting the truth I wanted. So, mind you, I still love philosophy. I just not at a university so much. And yeah, the truth is is an explosive subject these days. But yes, it definitely is the truth, and that inspires me to do docs. And I think also the realization that when I came out of college, I was felt very disempowered. I went into it, kind of doing a change maker degree, like a mix of philosophy, politics, and environmental science. And I came out of it and thought, okay, a lot of that work is going to consist of trying to convince people. So I'm just going to get a skill in convincing people, and documentaries were some of the most impactful in my life, especially as a teenager, I would say, in terms of actually getting me to change some of my behavior.
Absolutely.
And perspective, but all the way down to behavior, which is the important part, right? So that's what drew me to it initially, and the doc ideas now are still very much in that vein. Like, I want to make one about better economic systems. I want to make one about how to bring two opposing sides together to talk. Those sorts of subjects, like the really
fascinating
big,
stuff.
Yeah. Also very abstract, so not easy to film. I wish it wasn't that interesting human stories, because that is a lot easier to pitch and a lot easier to do.
But I feel with, I mean, if you're talking about bringing two groups together, right? Sort of, specifically landing on individuals with a particular type of background and personal story, bringing those two together can really, shed a lot of light. But I agree with you. Documentaries, Forks Over Knives made me go vegan. I've been vegan since 2012 when I watched it. Yeah. Like all kinds of stuff. Like I love docs. I love docs. I used to do a podcast with my wife called Highly Spiritual. It was about spirituality topics. And we had Chapman and Macklin Way, on, and they directed Wild Wild Country, which was on Netflix. And then they also now have another one, a new series out with them called, it's the one at the Palace. It's on Netflix. It's about the Palace of Auburn Hills in Michigan, where I'm from. I'm from Detroit. So cool. Yeah. And I love watching that stuff because it's a different, recognizing that documentary filmmaking is storytelling. You really have to craft a strong narrative, and you really have to, stick to that thesis, in order to prove successful. But then there's that other side of it where you get to really also just be really neutral and non-judgmental. And those documentaries are also very fascinating to me, because I'm like, Wild Wild Country did that, where I'm like, I feel like they didn't judge anybody. And in the end, we're sort of left to, draw our own conclusions. And I feel like that's like one of the most, takes such a skill set to be able to do that and not be, believe that, Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If you could, and I actually want to ask you about the commercials. I know we veered off because now I have all these questions about documentaries, but in Boston, you're doing commercial work right now, mostly producing, heading toward directing.
No, just a wild mix of both all at the same time, which is not conducive to sleep. So I still actually work for a company in LA as well for my LA time, just the way everyone is remote these days, that worked out, which is nice. So that's my producing work. And then over here in Boston, I've just kind of put my foot down and only introduced myself as a director to people.
Good.
Director and DP, to be fair. So I do get to run around with a camera too, which is nice. And that's slowly picking up a bit more, which is really cool.
I love that. Oh, I didn't know that you DP'd. That's awesome.
Yeah, I still don't make that a big thing because I'm still asking myself if I actually do. It's not something I actively pursued, but my doc work kind of got me into it to a degree where I was comfortable doing that kind of shooting. And I always liked lighting during school, but I never really was put in a position of doing like the classic fiction DP or like commercial where you really have to bring a lot of the elements and you're creating things from scratch, very much like an on location work with what's there sort of approach. So I just didn't really think I had those skills, but when I'm being put in a position, it works out really well. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna roll with it, and I do enjoy it a lot. There is a certain freedom of not having to deal with the directing responsibilities and the politics and just being able to focus more on one thing, which feels really good.
Sure. And I feel like it sort of goes hand in hand. Do you find that getting behind the camera really helps you be a better director?
I'm sometimes a better director when I also shoot. And I actually started making that a mental thing of like, when I feel lost in a scene as a director, I try to think, okay, if I had the camera in my hand right now, where would I be? What would I do?
Yeah.
And that helps. So that was an interesting discovery.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I just got my first Black Magic, so I can do more. I shot a little short with no lights at my friend's house, but it was, just to test myself. And it was fun, seeing where I chose to put the lens, like you were just saying. It was a skill. Or it was an educational experience, a good practice effort. I love that. I've talked to several women who have also fallen into DP work as well, because directing, there's such a technical side to it. And it seems that it seems like it's split. Like there's people who really treat directing on the creative aspect in terms of being able to pull the performances and bring the world together and keep everybody on the same page creatively to ensure that their vision comes to life. And then there's the other side who's also very technically driven. And it seems like the most successful directors are able to unite both things. Do you feel that that's one of your strengths?
100%. And I think I made it so to an extent too. I came into film school and I just told myself I'm going to just try out all the gear. I want to understand how the stuff works. I never want to be in a position where someone, especially a man, tells me on set that I don't understand something. And I doubt myself a lot. So I just knew that for me to feel confident, I needed to understand all these things. But on a less political level, I guess, it just helps when you understand the technical side and how the processes work. You're able to make decisions, even all the way down to creative decisions, in a way where things are just achievable and you actually get what you're looking to get in the end. So it just helps you make smarter choices, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, that makes
And
a
then
lot
when
of
shit
sense.
hits the fan, which it invariably will, it's also a bit easier to pivot and figure out like what to fight for and what to let go, things like that. I think, but it's also a lot about crew respect, honestly. I mean, and I've done an experiment recently, or it's my friend really who did it. We were on an all-female set, and at first I thought, oh, that's kind of a bit of a forced thing to do. I like a good mix of people. All women can be drama. All those things were going through my head, which I'm not very proud of. and I kind of told her that gently. But I was like, like we should find the best people we can find. Like, who cares
Regardless,
what their gender expression happens to be? And of course, I stand by that. But it was an interesting experiment because I felt myself questioned and doubted a lot less on set, and it was a lot more collaborative. And of course, we found amazing women. Like we picked our team carefully, and I think did a good job at bringing everyone into the fold. But still, it was a very unique experience, and it made me realize that usually I have to affirm my spot a bit more. Like there's a bit more of a prove yourself period. That you have to get through. And in that setting, I didn't. And it felt really, really refreshing. Now I've steered way off topic, but.
No, that's perfect, especially for this podcast, because that's something that, and I did actually want to ask you, the never ending, right, stigmas of being a woman working in film, which is that it's a man's, it's predominantly, especially directing, has been, for years, traditionally a man's role. And that fortunately is changing quite a bit, but I completely identify and agree with getting the best team creatively that can bring said story to life. But of course, if two people are equal skill sets, equal, and it's an equal resumes and equal temperaments, and one happens to be a woman, pay it forward, hire the woman, but that is so interesting that you were going into it a little unsure and then did notice that you were questioned a lot less. That's because do you find that having a male crew that you're not familiar with, is it difficult to get them to really hear you when you are sharing with them?
Yeah, sometimes I think I don't know. I have a whole lot of thoughts about that, and everything I'm going to say, of course, will be alienating to somebody and is grossly generalizing and all those things that I don't like to do. I've had horrible crews and I've had great crews, and it was just kind of a surprise that this one did align so much to it all being women, and it felt so great, and we all felt the same thing too. So it also just was a very special project. But I think, there's a general way in which guys tend to interact amongst themselves that's a lot more competition driven, I think, than what women would do. It's also sometimes, which is nice, like a lot more outspoken, and you don't carry grudges as much, which can be helpful on set.
Sure.
There's definitely a like counter side to that too. That's very positive. But to me personally, and how I like to communicate, I don't like that competition vibe. And there's so much already to sort out on set that like I don't need that.
Yeah.
So I've definitely felt that a whole bunch, especially in LA. There's more of that going around, I think, where everyone just is in a position of having to prove themselves
Yes.
quite frequently. At least if I compare it to like a set there to some of the other cities I've worked in, it was noticeable, and it makes sense because you just have to hustle harder there. So you're just in that mindset, right? I mean, I got in that mindset there too. To remind myself sometimes to turn it off.
Totally.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer of I think there's real differences in how women and men are educated to communicate. I don't think it's innate. I think at the end of the day, it's on a human to human basis, but something tends to happen when you put a whole bunch of dudes in a room in a semi-competitive setting.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel for men in that regard too, because they unfortunately are victims of toxic masculinity and the patriarchy as well. And that, you know, they've been taught they have to assume a certain air of confidence and a certain, you know, So
yeah, I should maybe say part of the reason we did opt for an all-female crew was that the topic was the experiences of Black and brown men in Boston, specifically around police violence. So it was a very sensitive thing, and we were exploring different sides of masculinity, from like hyper masculine to the very feminine. So through dance, it was an abstract project. It was a beautiful project. I can't wait for it to come out. It's like going through post and taking forever, as post tends to do, but we're getting there. And we just thought, okay, it makes sense to kind of take the pressure off of the talent a little bit if they don't have guys staring at them while they do this. So that goes totally to what you say, because there's just that sense with women that it's easier to open up, right?
Yeah,
it's easier to be vulnerable, and men amongst men have a much harder time doing that, which is really sad. Like, they miss out on a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I always try to look at the male perspective and the male experience through all of this, you know, collective waking up and discussion about patriarchal, you know, systems and that kind of stuff, because I do believe that we've all just been so indoctrinated with these ideas, especially in this country. I don't know what it was like growing up in Germany, but particularly or at least only, I can't even say particularly because I don't know, but just here, you know, we've all been indoctrinated with these particular mindsets, and it sneaks out in the craziest of ways. We have it's jarring sometimes when you recognize in a moment, oh my God, I can't believe I said that or thought that. Why was my initial thought? Yeah, right. It's wild.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the same for Germany. There's a lot of similarities.
And what about the film experience in Germany? You went back to Frankfurt and you know, met you luckily had said that you knew some people who were working in film there. I didn't.
I got super lucky. I was filming a show for a friend of mine who's a jazz musician, and it was literally just me with my little DSLR. I had no idea what I was doing. The jazz venue was dark as hell. I couldn't see anything. I was like, okay, learning my first lesson. This does not work. And this guy starts talking to me. He's like, oh, are you with the venue? Are you with the band? And it turns out he has a production company. And so literally got super lucky. I didn't know anyone in film. So it was very much a jump for me. The people I did know in film were my mom's partner, who worked in film for a long time, and some people I met traveling, but no one who I could actually like really rely on in Germany. So just jumped off the deep end. But yeah, I don't have a whole ton of experience there, honestly. I spent just over a year there, and I was just working at an ice cream shop to make money, and then just being on set whenever I could. Sometimes they paid me, sometimes they didn't, sort of deal. And just PA'd and did my own short, which was great, but that was pretty much the extent of it.
And what was like, how was there a lot of opportunity to like, how often were you able to get film? Like, how big is the community, I should say?
It was decent. And a lot of it was maybe similar to what's happening in Boston, where it's a lot of commercial / corporate content, but budgets are decent. So like, you know, you get to do okay things, but creatively it's not the most exciting. It was very much that kind of work over there. for what
Gotcha.
I got to touch. There's, of course, an indie scene and a feature scene and all that, but not so much in Frankfurt.
Is it more like Berlin, would you say? Is that kind of the
Yeah, Berlin, Munich, and Hamburg seem to be, from what I know, but again, don't take this for granted. I have not spent much time there in the past decade, so no.
Very cool. And so you mentioned this project just now about an abstract project with dance, and that is that the only thing you've got in post-production right now?
So I DP'd that one, which
Oh,
was
cool.
a hell of fun. Yeah. It's by Mariona Loretta. Loretta, I don't know how to say her name. She's never told me her last name. I'm sorry. But she is Boston based. She's amazing. Shout out to her right here.
Cool.
She's also a dancer, so she was just very connected with that world and how to direct the dancers, and it was really amazing to see her at work. She had a very clear vision for everything, which made it a total blast.
Yeah.
To work with her. It was definitely one of those where we were scrambling till the last second to get everything, because there was no money, and everything was so wild. Just even trying to get in touch with the talent when they were all grieving at various levels, just with everything that has had transpired last year. And it was just such a tough time to work for a lot of people, I think. And then the subject matter was intense, so there was a lot to get through. But it was a really, really, really special, really amazing set to be on. And I was on the Ronin for 3 days straight.
Cool.
Which broke my back a little bit, but was a lot of fun. Just be able to move everywhere and move with the dancers. That is something I really love to do. I love dancing, so to me that was very intuitive, being able to do that. And it's Boston, so you can just go down a street and film, and no one's going to say anything.
Best.
It started raining. We ended up on this random person's stoop, and we're in the middle of this really dramatic shot.
Oh gosh.
And suddenly we heard a voice through the thing, through the door, and they're like, "Oh, hi." And we're like, "Oh my God, we're so sorry." We launch into this whole explanation as to why we're here. They're like, "No, it's totally fine. Do you need anything?" And I was like, "What?" We're literally blocking your stoop. We didn't ask.
Yeah. You're like, I have been in LA for too long.
Yeah, literally. So that was a great experience. Yeah.
What are is that a festival? Is that going to go the festival route?
Yeah, it's called Altars. Altars. How do you say that word?
How does it spelled?
Like the altar in a church.
In like a church.
Yeah.
Altars. Yeah.
Altars. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a weird pronunciation of that. And yeah, it'll definitely do a festival run. I think currently it's slated to be done early November.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully at that point it'll start getting into things. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the submission, will be a couple months. So maybe about a year from now, people could potentially see that.
Yeah.
In festivals. Very, very cool. That's super awesome. And so is there anywhere that do you have, I apologize. Normally I look for a website, but I just specifically asked for Cranberry Nights and didn't ask for anything else. Do you have a place where you can direct people to see any of your work?
Yeah. So Sara X Robin. So it's like Sara Robin, but with an X in between. SaraXRobin.com has a bunch of my work and has my info and a little contact form too, if you want to get in touch through that.
Cool.
And it is linked to my Instagram as well, I think, which is also a good way to find me. Yeah, that would be the place.
Beautiful. And do you have plans, at least, are you going to stay in Boston, do you think?
That is a very good question. I'm not going to say yes, because I know all my LA friends, if they get to see this, will be like, what? No, I don't know. The one thing I told myself is that I want a winter in Boston, because it's just, I love winter and haven't had winters for a while. So definitely doing that. And then next year we'll see what happens.
I like that.
Wherever the work takes me.
Totally. I like that a lot. And I agree with you. I fantasize about going, and my parents got a place for the winter. They retired, and so they got like a winter place in Florida, but their house is vacant in Michigan. And I keep fantasizing about, I should ask them and just go get some writing done and stay for the winter, because
perfect.
Yeah. Well, I love that. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you for filling people in on where to find you. I can't wait to see what you do. I really, truly loved the short that I got to see. And I think your approach seems unique and like you've been driven by intuition to the place that you're at now. And those always tend to make for the most exciting artists. So hats off to you. And I really look forward to seeing, what else you do and where you end up.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Same. It's been a pleasure.